We looked last week at, like I said, this garment of praise, this idea that we will have trouble, that there will be difficulty in this world. Just a quick survey of some verses. We're told, when you hear wars or rumours of wars, do not be alarmed. We're told that's part of God's word. We can be heartbroken by it, we can be devastated by it, our hearts can cry out for it, but don't be surprised. These things are part of this broken world. We're told in 1 Peter, beloved, do not be surprised at the fiery trial when it comes upon you to test you, as though something strange were happening to you. That's what we often do. Why is this happening? Where did this come from? But we're told that surprise shouldn't be a part of that. Doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. Doesn't mean it's not difficult or painful or brutal to go through. But surprise is something that's part of this world. In John, Jesus says, I have said these things to you that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but take heart, I've overcome the world. And time again, we're told that this is part of our experience, it's part of our walk. And we looked last week at one of the things that we're given to persevere. But I thought there is another element that I wanted to look at today. We're going to kind of go through the first chapter of Colossians, which is an absolutely ridiculous thing to say, because the first chapter requires about 5 years to preach through in detail, and nearly every single verse you could spend weeks and weeks on. There's just so much, but I kind of want to paint the big picture of Colossians and what it's saying, because I think it talks about something that we're given, something that we have, a mystery it calls it, a secret, sort of a gift that we're given that equips us to face this world. I'll just start with the first part. I'll just read it. And like I said, I could pause on every single word nearly, but we'll go through it. Paul says, as he writes to them, we continually ask God to fill you with the knowledge of his will, through all the wisdom and understanding that the Spirit gives, so that you may live a life worthy of the Lord and please him in every way, bearing fruit in every good work, growing in the knowledge of God, being strengthened with all power according to his glorious might. So there's all sorts of things there, praying for wisdom and insight and knowledge of God's will, and growing in him and bearing fruit and being strengthened with power, so there's all these wonderful things that we could dwell on, but here's the reason that he wants you to have all these things, so that you may have great endurance and patience and give joyful thanks to the Father. And then he goes on saying that this is part of what he wants for us. But it's those two things, all that Paul's saying in these first bits. He wants us to have great endurance and patience and give joyful thanks to the Father. And it struck me that those two things together are quite rare. Mental health and well-being has become quite a popular thing to talk about, and is on the lips of many people. And I know there are people here who, when they hear those words, kind of roll their eyes, sort of this soft generation, these snowflakes, these people who can't handle anything, who need a good war to sort them out, and all that kind of attitude. I know that there's some who may think like that it's kind of people who don't know how to be tough and be strong and be resilient. And then there's others who believe it, actually, yes, this is really impacting people. We need to be aware of this, and they're trying to highlight it. And I know these two can be at odds, but in this passage, I think I see what well-being, what mental health, what we really need in these things. We need great endurance and patience. We need that resilience. We need that strength. We need that, sometimes that stiff upper lip. We need that ability to get on and go through and endure difficulties. At the same time, we also need joyful thanks. And what I find on both sides of this discussion is that you have one or the other, but very rarely do you have both. It's a bit like water. I'll use this as an illustration. You got those who everything is too much, the world is too difficult, or at least that's the kind of perception, that it's kind of like water. The trial comes and just makes a bit of a mess, and there's no backbone to it. And then there's the other side, which is a bit like ice. It's a bit harder, it's a bit firmer, and when the trial comes to that, it doesn't splash around and make a mess. It's not wet, that's what we call it, isn't it? You're a bit wet, you can't handle these pressures. But the problem with ice is that it's brittle. It might be strong for a while, but all of a sudden it snaps. I think of my granddad who fought in the war and had scars on his hands that we never really knew what they were for. But his brother said what he understood is that he'd grabbed a device that was thrown into their tank and it burnt his hands. And there were days when my nan would come up and stay with us, because the night before my granddad in his sleep would start kicking and lashing out, and my nan had to leave for a couple of days for him to sort himself out, and then she could go back. My granddad was incredibly strong. He was that stiff upper lip and resilient, but also brittle. That strength that he had that got him through and enabled him to cope was also quite fragile. And whatever side you're on, you're either you can't cope with things and it's too much and then it all splashes around and makes a mess, or perhaps you're the, nope, get on and carry on, but perhaps inside you're brittle. The Bible presents this option of something else. Something that goes in the water that changes it. So what I've got here, some call it oobleck. If you fancy, you might call it a non-Newtonian fluid. You decide which category you're in. And this has something in it, so that when you hit it, splashes, but it stays, see it sloshing around like water, but as soon as you add pressure, it goes hard. Now if you go slowly, your finger can go in, it becomes a liquid, but as soon as you add pressure, it goes hard and you can pick it up, and as you let go, it drips back in. It's a non-Newtonian fluid. It is a symbol of being anti-fragile. Some of us are fragile. When things happen, we break. Some of us are trying to be strong, but we're brittle. What the Bible presents is there is an option for us to be anti-fragile. That when the pressures come, it doesn't weaken us, it doesn't break us. In fact, it makes us stronger. That we are able, when the pressure, when the hammer falls, to stand firm with great patience and endurance, but not so strong that we close down the hatches and shut everyone else out. We become strong, but also joyful and light in our strength. And that combination, I think, is incredibly rare. To be strong and enduring and also light and joyful. And that's what Paul writes to the Colossians. He wants them to have. So how do we get it, Paul? What do we need to put in the water? Because corn flour might work for this, but it's not going to work for me. What do I need to put into the water? What do I need to put into me to give me this great endurance and also joyful thanks? Well, Paul then goes on this tour de force, this incredible sort of almost a rant just of everything that we have. And you're kind of clawing through, trying to find what is it that we have. So he says that we pray for you to have this, that you might have this joy and this endurance, for he has rescued us from the dominion of darkness and brought us into the kingdom of the Son he loves, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sin. And then he says this, the Son is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. He suddenly switches and goes, let me just tell you a bit about Jesus. He's this image of the invisible God. God is invisible. You don't see him, we're not sure where he is. Jesus says this, when you pray to your Father who is unseen, you go, you close the door, you talk to him, you can't see him. But Paul says you can in the face of Jesus. God is unseen, but Jesus has made him know he is the image of God. Jesus is not just God. We say that Jesus is God. God is like Jesus. That's what this verse means. Jesus is God. Yeah, that's true. But God is like Jesus. When you see Jesus, you see what God is like. He's the firstborn over all creation. He's the one who inspired it. He's the one who started it. Maybe that's what we need to know. Jesus is like God. That's good. In him, all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, thrones or powers or rulers or authorities. All things have been created through him and for him. Maybe that's what we need to know. Jesus is in control. He rules and reigns over all things. All things have been created through him and for him. Maybe if we knew that and really grasped that, we'd be able to endure things. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. He isn't contained by time. He holds it all together. He keeps it. He keeps the world spinning. He keeps atoms moving. He's the one who sustains everything with the word of his voice. Is that what we need to know? He's holding me up. He's the head of the body, the church. He's the beginning and the firstborn from among the dead, so that in everything he might have the supremacy. He is the head of this church. He's in charge. He rules and reigns for the church. He rose from the dead. Is that what we need to know to really endure and get through? God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in him. Jesus isn't a bit of God. He isn't sort of one part of what God is. He isn't the nice side of God or God on a good day. The fullness of God is in him. And through him, he reconciled all things to himself, that we are brought back to him. Things on earth, things in heaven. He made peace through his blood shed on the cross. Is that what we need to know? We're reconciled to God. He's made peace for us. Once he goes on, you were alienated from God. That's what Jesus is. That's who he is. This is what he's done. You were alienated from God. You were enemies in your minds because of your evil behavior. But now he has reconciled you by Christ's physical body through death to present you holy in his sight without blemish and free from accusation. If you continue in your faith, established and firm, and do not move from the hope held out in the gospel. Is that what we need to know? Jesus died for me, that he gave his life. My sin is swept away. It is cleansed. It is far from the east to the west, white as snow, renewed, clothed in righteousness. I stand before God and he says, perfect. Perfect. You're good. You're welcome. Is this our hope? Is this what we need to know? This is the gospel, he says, that you heard and that has been proclaimed to every creature under heaven, and of which I, Paul, have become a servant. What is it we need to put in the water to help us? There's so many options here, Paul. I can't really figure out what it is that I'm meant to know. I mean, it's all wonderful. I could spend years. In fact, you could spend the rest of the year just in Colossians 1, and you wouldn't have wasted your time. Don't read anything else. Just sit in this and meditate and chew on this. But Paul, what is it that I need to know? In the time that Paul's writing this, there was a group called the Gnostics. And they were a group who kind of had this idea that the physical world was yucky. It wasn't good, but gone wrong. It was yucky. You didn't want anything to do with it. So they had two options. You either avoided it, you had nothing to do with it, you cut out as much physical stuff, relationships, food, drink, activities. You got rid of all of it because it didn't matter. Or you just enjoyed all of it because it didn't really even matter what you did. So you could just do what you like, sleep with who you like, drink what you like, eat what you like, because it doesn't really affect you. And they were around at this time. These Gnostics had this idea that there was this secret knowledge. That what God, and no one really knows what the secret knowledge is because it was so secret, but the Gnostics, they had this secret knowledge of God that only they understood. If they cut out enough, or they devoted themselves enough, then God showed them this secret knowledge. And Paul's writing in part in response to these people, and he takes this word mystery and he starts to play with it. He says in the next passage, "Now I rejoice in what I am suffering for you, and I fill up in my flesh what is still lacking in regard to Christ's affliction for the sake of his body, which is the church." Loads of debate on that. What are you talking about, Paul? I'll have a chat with you if you want to afterwards, but don't get distracted. Come on, got to keep going. He goes on. He says, "I've become a servant, its servant by the commission God gave me to present to you the word of God in its fullness, the mystery that has been kept hidden for ages." Here it is. This secret that the Gnostics think they have. They haven't got it. They don't know what they're talking about. He says there's a mystery. There's a secret ingredient that we need, this secret ingredient. He says it's been kept hidden for ages and generations, but is now disclosed to the Lord's people. You getting anticipation yet? Come on, Paul, tell us what it is. Stop going on about all this stuff. Just tell us what's the secret. "To them God has chosen to make known among the Gentiles the glorious riches of this mystery, which is," come on, just tell us, what is the mystery? What is it we need? Can't we just stop messing around, Paul? Just tell us what it is. What is it we need to know? All this wonderful stuff, which one is it? He says this is the mystery that people think is hidden, but this is a mystery that God has hidden in plain sight. The mystery, the thing you need for endurance and joy and life in its fullness is this: Christ in you, the hope of glory. Amen. The secret source, the cornflower and the water, is the awareness that Christ is in you. All these things that he's just said about Jesus, all these wonderful things that you're like, whoa, my head is spinning. And perhaps today you're going, "Dean, you've already given us a full buffet. I can't take any more." That's all these things that I've talked about, all these things that you can know and you could dig into, all that Jesus has done for you, that you will spend a lifetime celebrating and praising and responding to. All these things, they're all out there until you realize Christ in me. All that I've said, all that he's done in me. That is my hope. See, we often talk about God. God is everywhere. God is everywhere. He's omnipresent, all places at all times. That's true. But the Bible is more concerned with God is here. It's true, God is everywhere, and you'll be right if you believe that. But the Bible is more concerned with getting us to a place where we can say, God is not everywhere. God is here. God is not up there, although that too would be true. God is in here. God is not out there. He is with me. And so when you come to Matthew's Gospel, you find the angels at Christmas call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. And you get to the end and you find Jesus, his promise, go into all the world, make disciples. I am with you always. Where are you? Christ in me. Christ in you, the hope of glory. Jesus in the room is what makes all the difference. Last Sunday evening we thought about this with Paul and Silas as a situation where they've been preaching the gospel, it goes badly, and they get arrested and thrown into this inner cell. And they're sat in that inner cell, and it says midnight passes, and they're singing and praising God with hymns and prayers. And suddenly the doors open and the chains fall off. And at that point, all of us, I imagine, would go, charge! Get out of here! This is our opportunity, leg it! And it says they stay there. They sit in that cell. And the jailer comes in and is amazed that they're still in the cell and asks, what must I do to be saved? And gives his life and surrender to this Jesus. Why didn't they leave? What we looked at last Sunday evening was they didn't leave because they knew that where God wasn't outside the cell. He was already in there with him. They didn't need to get out to get on with what God was doing. God was with them. He was already in there. That's why they could pray and sing as it got dark at midnight. He was already in there. And it changed. It gave them patience and endurance, and it gave them great joy. Both at the same time. Strength. And they've been flogged, they've been beaten, they've been thrown in here, but they have strength and endurance. But they also have great joy that they're singing and praising God. And those two things come together in that moment. Christ in you, the hope of glory. I wanted to show you a video, and I shared it last Sunday evening, and people who saw it said I should share it again today, so I will do. It's a story. I'll just see if I can find. You may have seen it over the Christmas period. This, The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse. It's a book you may have seen, lots of sayings and quotes, very, very encouraging and stirring, by a guy called Charles Mackesy. If you've ever done the Alpha course, on the Alpha course, he's on there giving his testimony about how he came to faith. He said he went on an Alpha course and sort of was interested by it, but didn't really get much of it. And at the end, a guy came up and prayed for him, and the guy had obviously had kippers for breakfast because all he could smell was kippers on his breath. And he said, and I was watching his Adam apple move up and down as he prayed, and he walked away thinking, well, that didn't do much. And then he says, as I sat down, I just had this overwhelming sense of peace. And he's a Christian. He often preaches at Nicky Gumbel's church, HTB, in London. And he wrote this book. It's not exactly a Christian book, but he's a Christian, and that influences him. And you can see it's God's fingerprints all over it when you look at it in that light. And BBC One did a huge their Christmas show on Christmas Day was a version of this story that you can still see on iPlayer. Anyway, this is a clip of a sermon that he preached, a message that he shared. He is an artist. He looks like an artist. He's a bit rude. I think we're all adults in the room. I think we can cope with it. And I think it makes a good point what the difference that Jesus in the room makes. So I'll just show you this. The guy got what we spend our whole lives trying to understand. All those things that Paul talks about, this Jesus that you could explain, somebody could explain and understand, that this God in Jesus, the image of God, and what he has done for us and what he has accomplished, and all of it means nothing until you realise that he's in the room. Until you realise that he's here, more than that, that he's in me. That's the hope of glory, of us being changed and transformed, of the glory before us, of seeing the glory of God. And if I can be honest, I'm not really into prayer, but I am into Jesus, and so we talk. I find that that's the answer. I don't believe in the power of prayer, I believe in the power of Jesus, so I ask him for help and find that he answers. I'm not into evangelism, I hate evangelism. I'm into Jesus, and so I will talk to people about him. I'm not crazy about preaching. You know what? I don't do this in my spare time. It's not a hobby of mine. But I am into Jesus. So I'm willing to stand up and talk about him. I'm not really into social justice. It's hard work and difficult. People are ungrateful. I'm into Jesus though. So I will try and stand up in those situations where the enemy is working to suppress and destroy God's good work. Not really into worship. When I say Jesus, something in me wants to cry out and bow down and declare his goodness. And sometimes I will sing a bit too. Not really into church. Have you seen the state of it? I'm into Jesus. So I like his people, and I find that they are weird just like me. It's Christ in me. It's him. That's the hope of glory. Not a rule, not a prayer, not a mission, not church planting, but Jesus. And I guess if you love Jesus, you'll do some of those things, but it's because of him. Christ in me, the hope of glory. And that difference of him out there to him here. So the question for this year is, what would you do differently if Jesus was in the room? That's what that guy, that's what made the difference. Realizing Jesus in the room. Perhaps you're familiar with that. Maybe if Jesus is in my heart, what would I do differently? Because you've been in prayer meetings where you think, these people aren't praying, they're preaching a sermon to me. They're praying for the benefit of everyone around them. What if we prayed as if Jesus was in front of us? How would our prayer sound? What if we sung as if Jesus was here? I find that the difference of songs of God and his greatness, which are wonderful and often rousing, and picking up to the songs that say you, the psalms that say you, where suddenly I'm talking to him, where I'm face to face and I'm saying to him, I love you. That you are good. Not God is good, although that's equally true, but there's a difference between God is good and you are good. I'm talking to you because you're in the room, because you're near. My actions, my responses are different when Jesus is in the room, when Christ is in me, the hope of glory. Paul says this is the secret, and it's not hidden from anyone. The Gnostics had this kind of elite idea, only the best, only the greatest, only the most spiritual, only the most holy. And Paul says, nah, this mystery is not like any other. This isn't Cluedo where you're trying to figure out what the answer is and who did it and where he is and what he's up to. The mystery is in plain sight. It's for everyone. It's for you. Christ is in you. And that's your hope. That's where you get this strength and this resilience. In a world that is difficult and dark, Christ in the room makes all the difference. And in the trials that you go through and the suffering that you endure, where God is stripped out of everything around you, Christ in you is where you still find hope. And just as I said last week, I cannot promise this year will be better. This will be your year. This will be the one where you make it, where you finally overcome and you get through. I can't promise any of that. Maybe it will. Or maybe it will get worse. Either way, your hope is Christ in you. To give patient endurance and joy in the Father. Anti-fragile. That you can go through these things and come out closer and come out more in love and come out more engrossed in who Jesus is and what he's done. Christ in you is your hope. So in a moment, we're going to pause. I'll pray. Just pause for a moment for you to respond, and then we'll pray. And we're just going to sing a couple of songs that are meant to be you songs. Jesus in the room songs. And we can sing them and get on and grab our coffee and then go. But I'd just like to invite you to just center your heart. Just imagine Jesus in the room. Picture, just embrace this idea, just trust, okay, I still don't quite get it, and I know none of us really do. Can you imagine Christ, all his glory, all his riches dwelling in your life? If that's too much, if Jesus in your heart, what are you talking about? Just like that man, Jesus in the chair next to you. It's Jesus with you. Maybe that's the first step. Just see what that does. See what that does today. See what that does this week. The King's arms are still open. He's still saying, come. I'm with you. For what today holds and tomorrow, Jesus in the room. is our hope. And so, Father, we just pause with that. We can keep talking about it. We could spend years dissecting every single truth and glorious, wonderful thing that your word says about your Son. But if we don't welcome him in the room, don't receive him in our hearts, if we don't recognize his presence, if we don't put our faith and trust in the gift of his Spirit in our lives, then we'll miss the mystery. We'll miss the heart. So I thank you that this isn't based on expertise or spirituality. It's not based on our track record or our understanding, how much we know or don't know. This mystery is for everyone. And it's put in plain sight so that anyone can take it. I just ask now by your Spirit, help us to see the invisible. Christ in the room, Christ in our hearts, our hope. Like the man in that story, Father, I pray as we recognise this, we would lean all our weight on you. As we recognise you, we wouldn't put on you our own perception, we would see you loving us. As we lean on you, Father, may the burdens that we carry, the trials that we endure, and the tribulation that we walk through, may we be transformed in them. May we find strength in our weakness. May we find the light that we need in our darkness. May we stop looking around to find it as if it isn't already ours. It is. Christ in us. Heaven's greatest gift is already ours. For some, they may receive it today as for the first time. For some, it will be just a reminder of something they've taken hold of in countless times in the past. I ask, Father, as we respond now, let us do it recognizing you in the room, you in our hearts. We need you. We love you. Draw us near, we ask, in our Jesus' name. Amen. Alistair Glove's just going to come and share a story he shared with me last week that just speaks to this and just may speak to you as we continue to contemplate this idea of what it means for Christ to be in the room. Alistair, to come and share.
Well, this feels weird. Head teacher, stand up in front of people all the time. Never been more frightened in all my life. I told Dean about this story last week, and whilst I've been listening to the sermon today, it's just been like somebody stuck an electrode in my arm, and I was thinking, oh, that's a bit like that, and then it's like the voltage is going up, and I'm hoping if I tell you the story, the voltage will go away. Feels very weird. I'm the head of a little Catholic school in London, but don't worry, I'm not a Catholic. You can talk to me. Joke. Next door to the school is a little convent, and there's 3 nuns who operate out of there. One of them, she's the smallest lady in the world you've ever seen, tough as old boots. She's been listening to our sermons for the last 4 years. She gets very distressed when they don't get posted online. Anyway, she works in the local hospice, and just before Christmas there was a man who came into the hospice, and for whatever reason she formed a bit of an attachment with him. He was quite rude about everything. His family knew he was going to die, so they sort of came along, and when people go into the hospice that she works at, they generally don't have very long. Anyway, as she put it, the family were getting very frustrated because they were coming around and they were having to spend a lot of time, but he wasn't dying, which sounds awful, doesn't it? But that's just how she expresses it. And he was very grumpy and he was rude, and it was quite obvious there was a sort of family tension there, you know, there was something wrong with what was going on. And she'd sit with him and talk to him, and one day, quite often what she does is she gives people little wooden, olive wood hand crosses. I don't know if you've come across those, so that people could just, if they want, not pray, but sometimes just sit holding that cross. So she didn't give him that, but she felt that he needed love, so she gave him a little wooden heart, and she just laid it there, and she just said, I want to give you that because I want you to know that we love you. So he accepted that, and then I think one of his relatives, they were Catholic, obviously, came along, and she said, oh, I'm going to leave you with this rosary. And he picked it up and he just threw it across the room. And so she saw this, and she said to me, she said it was quite a sight. And I said, for reasons of my own, I said, I think that that man, he's experienced some sort of abuse, whether it's abuse of power, whether it's some sort of other abuse. He's experienced some sort of abuse, and he hates that symbol. You only throw something away when you really hate it. And I said, have you thought of reading Hebrews 11 to him? So she said, oh, I might try and do that, but might not listen. Anyway, she went in the next day, and she sat with him, and she thought she'd have a crack at Hebrews 11, but then she said, I just couldn't do it, Alistair. But then I just said to him, you know what? You might have fallen out of love with God, but God has never fallen out of love with you. And she asked if she could just pray for him, and he let her. Now, for the previous 2-3 weeks, he, in her words, had not been dying like his family had been expecting, and it had been created. His mother, his sister, whatever else, they were all just really stressed out by everything, and it was all very cantankerous. He'd even been moved into the area where people are on their last legs, and Sister Anne had come back one day and found that he wasn't there anymore. Said, oh no, has he died? And they said, no, he's back in his room. So this was before her conversation. He died 2 days later at peace, a bit like the man, and a family that knew that things were okay. And I think that's really what was going through my head when I was listening to the sermon today. We make things too complicated. Yeah, I think marriages and families are a way of God showing us teaching us or trying to teach us how to love. And how often can we be in a relationship, a partnership as a father, a son, or a husband and wife, and we're next to each other but not really looking at each other. We are in harness together, we're going the same track together. But sometimes we get that moment where we sit down on a bench with the wife, we actually look into their eyes, see the creases, and we realise how much we really do love the person who is our partner. And I think sometimes we're so busy with our life, we're running along with Jesus. Sometimes we need to sit. And actually when we look in those eyes, it's when we realise we might have fallen out of love with him, or we might have taken him for granted. But he's never stopped loving us. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Alistair. Charles Maxey, in his book, one of the pictures is his summary of Christian faith, of life, and what it all means. And he says, we are made to love and be loved. And that's what Christ in me is. It's sitting, looking in his eyes, being loved, and loving him, and realising that is enough. In darkest moments and in desperate times, that is enough. And it holds and it keeps and it protects and it gives hope. And so our last song is our chance to do that. To look into his eyes and say, I love you, Lord. You never stop loving me. Today I want to say I love you. Let's do that together.